kind of this digital data-driven process visualization. And you can see all these process variants. It's just very obvious that, when you look at it the first time, it's just mind-blowing. It's a wow effect. It's great.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to the next episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner, and I'm the host of Process Pioneers. I'm particularly excited about the conversation we'll be having today. I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Gabriela Galic. Now, Gabriella, she's a manager at Deloitte. And from my sort of experience, I've only briefly met Gabriella, but I've seen her all over the internet, especially when it comes to process mining. She is the go-to when it comes to process mining. So very excited about this conversation. I am eager to learn a lot. Gabriella, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you for this nice introduction. I'm very delighted. Yeah. Awesome.
So I'm particularly interested to know is how did you find your way into the world of process mining? Because depending on the person I speak to, they end up, encountering process mining in different ways. Some are more formally trained, doing it through sort of university education. Others kind of stumble across it in their line of work that they're doing. Tell us about your journey, how you started off in process mining, and take us on a bit of a journey leading up to what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So for me, it was kind of both. So I first learned about process mining, I think it was 2015. I was studying finance and information management, and one of our classes has been business process management, right? The classical how to visualize the process, what is a BPMN model, what is BPMN in general. And one part of it was process mining. And back then in university, we did one use case where we analyzed the data and with Disco. And so this was my first get together with process mining in the university. And then how I actually started in practice and in business with process mining is a quite funny story and came a little bit unexpected because it was for me always clear I don't want to do anything with processes in my career. It was quite interesting how everything changed afterwards. So basically, I was a research assistant at the Technical University of Munich, and my job was to find founders and entrepreneurs to do an interview session for a research paper. Right. And then one of my roommates said, hey, I know somebody who founded a process mining tool, which is today also known as Celonis, one of the biggest process mining vendors worldwide. And in 2016, back then, it was a small startup of only like 40 or 50 people. And so I had the pleasure to meet one of the founders of Celonis and did my interview for my research paper. And then I learned more about the tool, about the software, about the current market and how they're doing their process mining project. And then I thought, well, I think this is pretty cool and pretty interesting. I think I apply for an internship. And I was lucky that I got accepted. And 9 months later, in 2016, I could start working at Celonis as an intern. And so that's how I started with process mining. Exactly.
That's amazing. So over the last 6 years or so, you would have seen, been part of many POCs, many implementations of process mining. What is it that really drives an organization to adopt process mining? Because you were saying before that, you are aware or familiar with the traditional process management approach, which a lot of organizations are, still in that phase of documenting their processes based on, workshops with different stakeholders and different things like that. And maybe not actually truly understanding what's happening behind the scenes with their processes. So I guess from your experience, what drives an organization to adopt process mining? What's that kind of that trigger point for them to be like, we need to look at this seriously?
Yeah. So basically, it's the optimization, right? And finding value in optimizing the processes and the operations itself. So this is also always one of the biggest drivers for the organizations. And what I found always a lot of things, because process mining always says, or the market is known for process mining, that it can reveal a lot of value, right? And you can identify a lot of opportunities with process mining. And that's what companies would like to try out, right? And see, okay, great, let's do process mining. And I want to identify which value I can get from process mining. So this is definitely one of the biggest drivers. But kind of the driver for every company is sometimes very different, right? Or for example, I had customers who said, we need to analyze the production process across 4 different plants because we're doing a S/4HANA standardization, right? So their goal was to standardize the processes across 4 different plants. Other customers says, hey, I want to increase, I have an OKR, I have one goal to increase my business, to increase my metrics. I think process mining can help me achieve these goals, right? And others are, I would say, are included, also process mining is included in these typical process optimization, process redesign projects where you're doing both, as you just said. Okay, let's do a brown paper approach, right? Let's document the process. Let's see how the process should look like. But on the other hand, let's also see how the process is actually flowing and how should we change or redesign the process.
Yeah. Okay. I'd imagine in the early days, like going back to 2016, maybe you would have experienced maybe a bit of resistance towards the concept or the idea, maybe more so than now, where, people have been educated on process mining. People are starting to understand the value in it and how powerful it is. And people are starting to come to people like yourself to be like, we need this. How do we approach this? But do you still find that there's resistance? Do you still face resistance on this concept? And if so, why?
Yes. And that's a very good question. As you said, the resistance didn't change kind of the last years. Yes, the market is bigger. Yes, there are more clients. Process mining are using process mining. But at the end, there's always some questions which come across, which are also valid, right? Which I would ask also, like they're totally fine. So I would like to give 2 examples. For example, first one is the resistance towards, the comparison towards a business intelligence tool. So this is very common. Like always like, hey, these are great KPIs, these are great dashboards, but I can do the same with the BI tool or with my BI dashboards. But that's not the case. Yes, you can report KPIs, but the difference between BI and process mining is that BI, you have your static KPIs. And yes, some BI tools also have the drill down into the data where you can drill down for companies or countries. But basically that's it, right? And with process mining, it's different because first of all, you have process-related insights. So you see the process explorer with all the various process variants. You can drill down into process sequences or process steps. You can identify bottlenecks, inefficiencies, exceptions. And then based on the bottlenecks or the inefficiencies, then you can drive your analysis, analyze the KPIs, etc. And I have a good example for this as well. So another customer I had, this was also very interesting. He said the difference between BI and process mining, and that's totally true, is with process mining, also with BI, I know that it's bad. I have bad metrics, I have bad KPIs. But with process mining, I can analyze where and why I have these bad metrics, right? So we had this project where we knew, for example, we have a bad metrics in a specific country, and then process mining helped us to really identify, okay, why do we have this bad country? And then looking at the metric, looking at the process, we saw, oh, great. Oh my gosh, there's a long throughput time between these 2 process steps. Then we have a lot of exceptions, right? Or we have a lot of different people working on this process. So, and then we could, of course, drill down into these bottlenecks and see then exactly, okay, what is the root cause behind? And so this is basically one of the resistance, but this is also a solution or an opportunity to say, this is the difference between process mining and BI, but it's totally valid, and it's not the same at the end.
Yeah, great. And obviously, it makes sense. Well, it makes sense to me, and I can see that the value in it. I can see the power in it, and I'm sure there are plenty of organizations that have adopted the technology. And as part of their journey, they're now facing different challenges or hurdles that they've got to overcome. What are the foundational elements that organizations should have in place before adopting process mining? Do they need to have anything in place? I mean, one that comes to mind is an organization that's adopted process mining and it ends up sitting there unused because they don't have the resources. Would you say that's one of the biggest sort of challenges? What other challenges come up when adopting process mining?
Exactly. So you already said it. So basically, if you would ask me, okay, what are the biggest challenges? I would definitely say the resources, right? Finding the right resources who have the right skill set to do this process mining project and to implement process mining. And but this is, on the other hand, also a success factor, right? So it's kind of both. So the challenge is that we currently are facing, like, the market of process mining is growing so fast and companies are eager to do it. But on the other side, we need people who understand the tool, who knows how to work with process mining, and who really understand what process mining is and which value process mining delivers, right? And there are specific roles which are very, very crucial for a process mining project.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. And obviously, you've worked in many different implementations, as I mentioned earlier. Are you finding it's working cross-industry, regardless of the size of organization, or is there a particular sweet spot in terms of which organizations are benefiting the most from process mining?
I didn't see a specific organization or industry which are benefiting the most, because as me personally, I worked on cross-industry client engagement, and I also, back in the time when I was working for a process mining tool vendor, we did also different kind of industries. So I would not say that it's specific for one industry. It can be applied across various industry and use cases. It's amazing. So if you're doing the automotive production process or the global drug development process, or process mining can be applied in hospitals, right? And then, of course, I would say classical standard processes of every company, like the accounting processes, the purchasing processes, or the IT service management processes. So I think there's no, if the data is available and we have and the data quality is good, we can definitely apply process mining across various industries and processes. Yeah. Great.
And can you share some examples or stories with us about some of the biggest wins that you've seen? Obviously, organizations wouldn't be taking this step into process mining if there wasn't significant value there for them. And one thing that the audience of Process Pioneers like to hear, where is process mining being used on a commercial level and delivering real, tangible commercial results to an organization? Do you have a couple of stories or examples you can share? I mean, you've already shared a few, but we'd love to hear some more.
Yeah, sure. But first of all, I think when we talk about the biggest wins, I also need to say definitely one of the biggest wins. And we also conducted a global process mining survey last year where we asked a lot of companies, what have been your biggest wins so far, right, in process mining project? And it's interesting. And I also think this is one of the biggest wins is transparency. It's still, I know it's not a tangible result, of course not, but it's still one of the biggest wins people can get very fast. Because, as you said also in the beginning, a lot of companies didn't even start to, and it's 2022, and I've seen this across a lot of companies, they didn't even start with documenting their processes in a BPMN model or in a PowerPoint presentation or visual, doesn't matter how, or they're outdated or not complete. So, and then when you start with process mining and you show them kind of this digital data-driven process visualization, and you can see all these process variants, it's just very obvious that, when you look at it the first time, it's just mind-blowing. It's a wow effect. It's great. And people are eager and want to learn more about it. They're interested. They say, oh my gosh, I need that. I want to continue with that. I think this will help my business. And this is just the beginning. And that's why I say transparency is for sure one of the biggest wins. The next kind of quick win we have seen, and this is all in our projects as well, is the automation potential, right? Because if the listeners maybe don't know, but with process mining, one of the biggest KPIs you can also measure are not only kind of the throughput time between the different process steps, but also the automation rate. So what I can see then later in the process mining tool is that you have for every single process step, you can see the automation rate per each step. And just by looking at the process and analyzing the process with process mining, you can directly detect your automation rate, which means you can see this process step A has a low automation rate. Oh, okay, there's an opportunity to optimize it, right? Or to automate it compared to other ones. So that's why I would say definitely the automation potential with process mining is also one of the biggest wins. And then there's two others. The third one is what you just mentioned, kind of the values, as the tangible value, right? Increasing your customer satisfaction, increasing your metrics, your financial metrics, reducing your throughput time, and reducing also the exception rate or the change rate in the process, higher customer employee satisfaction as well, right? And so these are the typical kind of value or the tangible results you can get out of process mining. Yeah. And last but not least is the win you have with process mining is the risk management, right? Process mining can be applied for process monitoring, which can help internal audits as well, or the internal controllership to just monitor the process and see, do we have any incompliant processes? One example for that is, for example, checking for the segregation of duties and monitor the process. Yeah. Right. But this is kind of summarize the four biggest wins I see and our clients see with process mining. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And when you were talking about transparency, obviously for maybe the senior leadership, it's powerful. It's valuable. It makes sense to them. They're able to see insights that they've never been able to see before. Do you find that there is a whole that there is potentially some resistance there because of the transparency, because it is exposing people in some way or another? It's exposing the work that they're doing. And what's working really well, but it's also exposing what's not working so well. Is that a challenge that process mining sort of brings up when someone maybe that's been doing the same task for a number of months or a number of years, all of a sudden is being told or shown that it's not as effective or efficient as it possibly could be? Is that something that organizations need to be aware of when adopting process mining, or is that sort of negligible in terms of the disruption it may cause?
Yeah, I think the latter, right? I think it's within the disruption it may cause, because I didn't see this obstacle yet with the organization that they said, okay, this transparency would be an obstacle for them. I've seen other obstacles which they face, I think, but one of them is basically, why do we need this? I think we talked about this with the BI tool. This is one, right? Or different obstacles are the data is not good enough, or the data validation is an issue. But coming back to the transparency, it's not that's nothing I have seen so far, obviously. But yes, I think this with the user or the end users, that they can be, for example, monitored, or we can see what they're basically doing. This is basically, I think this is also depends, because I've seen a lot of projects globally, it depends really on the country where you are operating. And normally what we are doing with all our projects is that we anonymize all the data, of course, and we are not tracking any user data. So that's why it's never an issue with the management or leadership or the organization itself when coming to this transparency. Yeah.
No, that's good. I think looking at more traditional process management, running workshops with key stakeholders, oftentimes there can be a lot of sort of opinions thrown around what they think the process is, what's happening. A lot of disagreement in terms of what's going on. But obviously with process mining, we're looking at the data. It's painting a picture for us. And I think the other thing it's doing is it's painting a certain picture based on the data that it's available. So it may not be the full picture, but what that might be pointing to is a lack of quality of data. So even if it's not painting the full picture that to be true, it's then it's a matter of looking at, well, how is this data being recorded? Why is it being recorded? What's missing? Is there anything that we're not seeing here?
Exactly. No, I can totally agree with that. So we had this, we always have these conversations, even with process mining, and that comes back to this conversation about the skill set. You need the right people in the room who really understand both. You need the people who understand, first of all, the data and the source system, right, from the process. So when I ask them, please help me understand how a process runs, where I can get this data from, which table is it stored? Is it customized? Which filters do I need to apply, right? And it's still a challenge, I would say, when visualizing the process or identifying which process steps I would like to cover, and then finding the right data in the source system. So, and it's still it requires a lot of patience and time to get everybody up on speed, because as I think said in the beginning, one of the biggest success factors is people need to understand what process mining is and what it can deliver. So if you have the data experts, he really needs to understand what is my output at the end, right? So that he can help us with the right data and he can provide us with the right data. Because I've seen always some projects also start differently. So we extract, we found, for example, just a part of the entire population. And then afterwards, when the data expert sees in the process explorer and the process mining tool what is really required, then he's saying like, oh, okay, now I understand what you need. I think we need to add this and that, more data to see the full process, right? And I've seen that a lot because we're visualizing the process and some customers say, yes, that's right, but there are some steps missing, right? Either because we didn't extract the data or the data is in a different source system captured. We just extract the data from the one source system. Or, but this is, I think, another story, data which is not even captured in source systems, but, for example, just done manually on the screen, right, on the computer. So where you then basically need task mining for that. But yeah, I can see these discussions, and we always have these great discussions. I love these discussions because everybody comes to the same table, and then we have all the same goal to visualize this process. And so what I wanted to say, the first biggest, or the first most important person is the data person. The second person is the process expert, right? And he's asking these questions like, okay, that's right, this is not right, there's something missing, etc. Yeah, but yeah, I agree. This is also one of the challenges we have, or the kind of sometimes the resistance, right? Is this really the right data I'm looking at? And most of the time, I can say yes, it is, because this is the source system, this is the timeline, this is the data we extracted from, right? So this is just data driven. There's nothing wrong about, but it's just the most important thing afterwards is the validation. So the data expert and the process owner, as well as the leadership and the management, coming back to this, needs to trust the process visualization and the data. And for that, we need the data validation. At the end, if the data owner and the process owner says, yes, that's correct, that's perfect. Then we can drive our analysis, and then we can show the value, because then we have the trust in the data, and then everything else is kind of, done and prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And what about for processes what about very manual processes that aren't being recorded by any system, that's not being guided by any workflow engine, time stamps, time codes, they're not being recorded, things like that. How would you guide an organization that is facing that challenge?
Yeah. So there are different technologies out there as well, which are called, for example, task mining, right? So what task mining does, you can record the screen or the desktop of the employees, and then, for example, 4 weeks, and then you can monitor what clicks has been done on a desktop. For example, when somebody writes a mail, of course, it's not captured as a digital footprint in the source system, right? But when we record it in this screen, then we have this timestamp. Then we have all the requirements we need for process mining, which is a case ID, transaction, the process step, and the timestamp, and who is doing it, right? So the technology behind is called task mining. You do a screen recording, you run the screen recording, for example, for 3 or 4 weeks, and then afterwards you have the right data sets, and you can combine it with your data set from your source system. And the great thing about that is later, when you visualize this in the process, you can actually see, okay, the first step has been done, for example, in a source system, but the third, fourth, and fifth step has been done on a desktop because somebody opened Excel, then somebody opened Outlook, and then you open a different application on your app, and then you jump back to the source system. And this is very valuable and kind of the next process layer from visualizing the process, which is more detailed. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of the listeners that tune into Process Pioneers, the process mining would be relatively new for majority of them, I would say. Where do you begin? What's step one? Because, there would be people listening to this conversation where you've piqued their interest. They want to explore process mining further. They've heard about it, but maybe it's this conversation that tips them over that sort of edge where they're like, we need to do this. Where do they start? Where do they begin? What process do they look at? There are so many processes in an organization. Is it a matter of looking at the data, seeing what process has the most amount of data available, or where do they begin? What's step one?
Yeah, so I would highly recommend to start with I would say highly standardized process, or a process where everybody is very common. For example, you start with the accounting process like accounts payable or accounts receivable, or with the purchasing process, which are very, I would say, in the process mining world, if you're not new to it, very standard and very often used. But this is really the starting point because, and based on that, it depends, of course, which source system you have, but you need to pick then this one process which is based in one source system. So this is also a recommendation I would have, that you have like a limited amount of data, which is very easy to extract. You have only one source system. It's very clear. It would be even better if the information or the tables where the data is stored is not highly customized, or you just follow a very standard source system implementation with all your data. So choose the process which you basically, okay, this is I would like to start with process mining. This is the process I would like to start with, which is highly standardized, and then I can try myself out. This is the one approach. The other approach is which is of course more challenging. You start with the process which is the highest value in your organization, right? For example, as I said, a production process, right? Or a development process. Because there, normally you can find kind of the biggest value, of course, at the end, and the most tangible results. But it depends, for example, of course, how risk averse you are, how much budget you have, and how you would like to start. But what is your goal if you want to do process mining, right? If you would like to try it out, do a small POC, I would definitely recommend to do the standard way with a very common process like purchase to pay or accounts payable with one system. But if your goal is, no, I would like to identify a lot of tangible results and value, I would definitely go with a more complex process, or saying the process where, it's the biggest one in your value chain.
Yeah. Okay. And is it, obviously there's lots of different technologies out there when it comes to process. We've got different process automation technologies, robotic process automation. Is that how does it work, or how does it complement that work? I know a lot of organizations that maybe dive into different technologies like RPA as one example, and they haven't optimized the processes. They haven't analyzed what's actually happening. They just deploy bots, and the bots are just doing the same work the best way they think is at that point in time with the knowledge that they do have. And there's one example or one scenario I heard recently where they just turned 150 bots off because they were doing more damage than good, doing more harm than good. They'd invested all of this money, but the processes weren't optimized. How does process mining complement that work? Because again, I'd say that there's quite a few listeners that they're already doing an RPA thing, or they're thinking about an RPA thing.
Yeah, this is great because, as I said, I think at the beginning, right, one of the PPIs or KPIs we're capturing process mining is the automation rate. And how are we doing this? As I said, we're collecting all the transaction and event logs from the customer source system. That means we have all the information who has done this transaction or this process step, right? And we can see in the data if this has been done, for example, by a human being, a system, or a batch user, or a bot in your case, right? So, and then based on this hundreds transaction, we can create a ratio and then see for every single process step the automation rate. And if I, for example, now say, as I said, process step 1 has a very low automation rate. So then I can, in the next step, this would be my starting point, for example, for an RPA investigation, I would say, right? Because RPA is, you can deploy, of course, RPA across the entire process, but the level between, I always say, the level between RPA and process mining is a little bit different because RPA is more on a task mining level, right? And process mining is on a higher level. And so that's why if you have one single process step where you have a very low automation rate, that's really a good starting point to make then in the second step, for example, task mining, to then check which actual transactions, activity, manual process steps has been happening on the desktop, right? And then you can see in the next step, okay, great, here I think that's a huge potential for RPA. And I think then you have less risk to deploy 150 bots which are wrong. I think this is kind of a very good approach to deploy RPA in a very good way and to find a lot of potential to implement it correctly. Yes. Yeah. But this is interesting, Daniel, because I think in the other way, I would love to have mined also the bots which are doing, I would say, the inefficient work. I think this is also very interesting to see from a different perspective. So what you can do also, if you already applied RPA, if you've done RPA, we can run process mining still on top of it and then see, okay, are the bots doing really the right thing? Yes, it's automated. That's great. It's fast. Nobody needs to do it. But is it still the right process steps, right, conducted? Or how is there any other technology we can use to optimize or automate the process? Yeah,
great, fantastic. And when you look at the future of the process mining space, obviously you're working with very large organizations that are working at the cutting edge of this technology. What does the future look like? Is it going to be a blend of different technologies? Is it going to combine with automation where you'll have processes that automatically optimize and improve themselves, intelligent automated processes? What does the future look like? Obviously, not every organization is ready to jump to the future, and they need to get some fundamentals in place at the moment. But there are going to be organizations out there that are at this cutting edge. So what does the cutting edge look like, and what does the world of process mining look like over the next 2, 3, 5 years?
Exactly. Yeah, good question. So there are two things, as you just said, I think short-term and long-term. And as I said, process mining made a great development the last years, but there's still a lot of companies which haven't yet started with process mining, right? Or I have clients who just started with one small process, right? And the future is big. So I think short-term goal or vision or the future of process mining is first, and I would like to, I wish that. So basically that every single process of the company is being mined. So basically all processes, and not only one or two, so all processing across the entire organization, process mining has been applied. The employees or the process owner are doing their reports based on process mining, right? So this is kind of the short-term vision that it's implemented across the entire organization. And then, yes, the long-term vision, and I agree with you, I can see this as well, is kind of two things. The one thing is it's going to be combined with, I see that kind of combination between process mining and process optimization through, for example, automation and intelligent algorithm, right? So the software or a process mining software not only analyzes the as-is process, shows us inefficiencies, bottlenecks like late payments, high change rate, right? But he then also, based on the data, of course, we have, it's going to be intelligent. And there's already tools out there who can do this already. But I think this will expand drastically across all companies in future, where the tool will not only tell me what is wrong, but then you will have the ability to directly execute the process or to change the process kind of live in the tool and say, okay, great. For example, hey, the tool will tell me, hey, Gabriella, you paid on time late rate is very, very low. We need to increase that because this is one of our OKRs, right? So if you pay your vendor today, you will increase your paid on time rate by 2%. And if you pay tomorrow, you will again pay late. So these are kind of alerts, action items which process mining can be enhanced by new technologies, which will help myself as an end user and the entire organization to have better processes at the end, to be faster and to be more automated. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's great. And obviously, in this conversation, we've very much focused on process mining, what's possible there, and I think I'm already anticipating a lot of messages and feedback from the listeners about this is something that they want to learn more about. They want to understand how can it work for their organisation, because every organisation is different and has different challenges and hurdles and a different makeup that needs to be considered. So where can the listeners go to learn more about process mining, and not so much in a theoretical sense, which that there would be that interest there, but I would say that more of an interest is, well, how can it practically work for us as an organisation? Where do they go? Is it by talking to people that have been there and done that, or are there some great resources that you'd recommend?
Yeah. So first of all, I think there's a great website, which is an independent website about process mining, which is called processmining.org. So basically, first of all, yes, you can also learn what process mining is, which customers, I think, applying process mining, which vendors exist in process mining, right? So you can really browse to all the vendors and say, okay, let's check what are they doing, right? What are the pros and cons, etc. And also, so I think this is kind of the first starting point, which is great. On the other hand, I would highly recommend as well the Center for Process Bionics from Deloitte, where I'm working at. As I said, we're doing our services for our customers since years now in the field of process mining. So if there are any questions out there, I'm also happy to answer that. But the Deloitte offers the process mining services globally. It's called the Center for Process Bionics. So I'm happy to exchange with anybody who's interested in that. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Well, Gabriella, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me today. I've certainly been learning a lot from you through this conversation, and I am so certain that our listeners will have learnt a lot as well. And I'm already anticipating a barrage of emails and questions coming through. So for those that are listening and want to follow up with Gabriella, please connect with her on LinkedIn. As she said, she's happy to have a conversation and to answer your questions. So I'm very excited for that. But Gabriella, thanks for joining with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.